Alright, Kenman here, and I was just kind of hanging out looking at some of my knives. You ever have one of those knives where you just kind of look at it and say, you know, this is a great knife, but it could just use something more. You know, it could pop a little bit better. It's got good action. It feels nice in the hand, but you just kind of wish it just kind of did something more for you. What do we do in that case? Die project number 46. Yeah, you know, let's make it something purple like this. Or maybe we want to turn it to a brighter red. There's so many different options with some dye. What could we do to this one today? Before we start, I'm not sponsored by anyone. I purchase everything at retail price. I do these videos because I love discussing knives and sharing info and ideas with others. If you have any questions or thoughts, please feel free to comment below. All right, this Sencut Scepter, we're going to get this one done today. It's going to be an all-in-one. If you haven't seen any of my dye videos, check them out right up there. But by the time this video is over, this knife will have a completely different look. We're going to do a little before and after shot. Here is the before. Okay, remember that, and we'll mix it in with the after as we finish later on in the video. Let's take it apart. Last looks, it does feel great. It looks great. The blade is, actually the blade is off a little bit to the right, but I did check it to see if it was loose or if I could loosen it. I've had some where I go on and start the video and then I realize it's super tight and I struggle with loosening them up. So I've kind of gone into most of them, and you just kind of check and make sure that you don't need to have to worry about some screw that's not going to come off right in the middle of the video. All right, table is set. Sencut, what color do we think it is going to be? Comment below. All right, so this is not a captive pivot, but I'm going to have to use two anyway. Like I said, I did go in and kind of do that quick little pre-check to see. Like I said, what was it, my Remet Seahorse, I started the video on it, talked about it for a couple of minutes, and then when I went to take it apart, I realized that those screws on the body are not coming off, and I spent a few minutes, and then I decided to stop the video, and I hit a pause to then see if I could do something where I could get them loose quick, and then just unpause. And long story short, I completely stopped the video because those screws aren't going anywhere, and I stripped out like 3 bits trying to get them just to start, and it didn't work. So I'm not sure what I'm gonna do, if I'm gonna have to get a heat gun out maybe and heat those up, try to get them loose. It's kind of a first that I've actually did not successfully. Well, actually, I've had a couple where I struggled. The Gerber turd. Wow, that's a long screw. That Gerber I struggled with taking apart. I ended up getting it apart, but there was a couple screws that did not want to come out. When I take knives apart, I like to pay attention, make sure you see how everything was so you can put it back together the same way. All right, there is the knife itself. This one has the bearings that are open on one side and closed on the other. And if you notice, this has open side, there's the closed side. So the open side was towards the blade and the closed side was away. If anything, when I put them back together, I like to pay attention to those. That would be one of the most moving parts that you probably want to put back the same way it was. Okay. We have it apart. Here are the thin, small scales. Wow, these are really, there is not much, focus, not much to these, right? Okay, we're going to go to the kitchen and get going on the dye. Okay, we are all ready. I've got them on these hooks. I've got my dye heated up. We're going to go ahead and drop them in. Stir them around. You want to make sure that you don't have any air bubbles on the scales. An air bubble is a spot where dye is not hitting, and so therefore it won't come out as even. Now we've got them in there. We'll let them sit. These are micarta, so they'll go pretty quick. I am using a RIT dye. Got about 2 ounces of the dye and maybe 20 ounces of water. And that I have almost boiling. You can kind of get it close to boiling. The heat is kind of what activates it. Now we can let them sit in there. Micarta, we're not going to have to actually let sit for too terribly long. Look at how green they're getting. They were kind of a dull, soft green, almost a whitish chalky green, and I'm using a yellow. It looks orange, but this is a yellow. So I think this yellow is really going to make the green scream out. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, they're micarta, so they don't need to take as long. Some of the micarta ones I did, this was kind of a dull micarta. It used to be this color like this here, and I added some blue and green to it, and then we sanded it to kind of give it this kind of weathered, worn in kind of look. I might consider doing that to this depending on how it looks when we're done. Here's another one I did, this cobalt. This was also that same kind of sandy color like that one. And I went in and sanded the edges after we did this red and kind of gave it this lighter, worn look. I love it. I think it looks great. Everyone's got personal taste, you know, and everyone likes something different. Here's one I just did with this Migron where we just did a nice red and just leave it red. Give it that clean red and black. I did the spacer, the back spacer as well. Got a few more that we're gonna do soon. We can talk about in a second. I want to take a look at this and see. I don't want them to go too crazy. Wow, look at that nasty. Oh, okay. This is doing stuff. But yeah, I got another Kaiser right here. What color would you like me to try, or what would you like to see done with this one here? It's already got kind of a dirty look to it, but we could do something fun. Give it kind of a weathered look or continue to add to that weathering faster. Here's another Sencut, kind of similar to the one we're doing now, except for instead of that base green, it's kind of a base tan. Comment below, what color would you like to see this one? I'm going to be doing all these pretty soon. Got one more Kaiser right here. This one's a neat one. It's got a different texture than the other ones, kind of this more, I don't know, snake skin, kind of a burlap. It's cool. This is a front flipper only knife. Interesting, but it's fun. What color would we like to see this one? Okay, I'm going to get these out of my way. I have a water bath right here. When we pick these up and look, they still are kind of soaked in dye, so you can't quite tell exactly. It's usually a little darker than they look. So if I go straight to this water rinse, it gives us enough of a rinse so we can kind of see where we're at. And then if we want to go back in, we can. And if we want to stop, we can stop. Oh, what do you call this? This is like cat diarrhea green. I don't know. I do not know, but that is, wow. I mean, I knew the yellow was going to hit it kind of weird. What do we think about this? Do I go back in? I think we might just, I don't know how much darker, because it is yellow and because they were green. I really didn't, it's kind of a test just to kind of see what we can get out of it. But, as I've said in other dye videos, basically when you do a dye, you are adding dye, you're adding color to something, but you cannot not have the dye, the color that's already there. You know, so this has this orangish brown. This will always continue to add to that orangish brown. Kind of like this right here. These were green. This is yellow dye. I mean, it looks orange like I said, but it is yellow dye. If we were to put a white G10 scale in here, it would come out yellow. So what you're seeing here is that light green mixed with this yellow to give us this crazy, weird, mustardy, dark, I don't even know what shade to call it. It's fun though. I'm excited. Once they're dry, that's the other thing, is it's micarta. So when micarta is wet, it definitely looks darker and slightly different shade than it is when it's dry. So when we're done here, I'm going to take them out. I'm going to have to let them completely dry before we put it back together anyway. But once it's dry, we'll have to look at it again and then make a decision on whether or not we want to go back in or maybe go into a different color completely. It's all an experiment. You never know. I'm going to turn that heat off. Take these off, and we're going to see where we're at here. I honestly think with micarta, where we're at, this is going to be about where we're going to get. I did notice doing micarta scales that, like, you can almost see on the video there, it looks like you can rub it off still. Like it's kind of like still kind of on it. So I kind of go in and really kind of rub against the texture of the scale to try to remove any excess dye and just make sure there's just water then on there. Because if you have this splotch of just solid dye in that area and you take it out, it can continue to dye and then make that area darker than the rest. And depending on what you're doing, that wouldn't necessarily matter, especially if we were doing some weathering. It really wouldn't make much of a difference. But if we're trying to make a solid uniform color, you want to pay attention to stuff like that. Okay, let me just get these a little dab dry so we can sneak a peek. Here we are. All right, I'm going to get these completely dry, and I'll see you with some dry scales at the table. Okay, they dried and they are yellow. Can you believe it? Micarta, when it's wet, it definitely does look different. I love this color. I think it is just silly. We're going with it. Let's put it back together, huh? Impressively interesting. Like I said, I was thinking it's going to be more green. You could see it before it dried. And I don't know. Sometimes pleasant little fun things happen. The bearings had the closed side to the blade. And then see this little smiley groove? There's a pin on both sides of the blade. That pin sits in there. And then that's the stop pin that stops the blade from continuing to swing open. It's an interesting design. I like it. All right, so let's get these spacers here. Fairly simple design. Let's put that on there. Okay. Keep some pressure on there and get this pivot going. Kind of at least hold that blade area in place. All right. So there is that. Okay. That looks good. I'm going to just go ahead and pinch it one more. I'll squeeze. When you put a knife back together, you want to be careful about keeping the blade centered. So you got to watch out and just make sure you tighten it down appropriately. If you do get it bad, you can loosen everything back up and fix it. But if you just pay attention when you do it, generally you can get it good and straight. Sometimes you have struggles with some knives. You get a knife and it isn't centered. If it's centered when you got it and you put it back together, you shouldn't have too many problems recentering it. But if it was never centered, you might struggle with it. I'm going to put the pocket clip on this side, which means the extra screw goes in this one. Like I said, I haven't cranked everything down quite yet. I'm just kind of getting them in position and not too crazy tight. This has a captive pivot on it. I mean, non-captive pivot, I apologize. So that means you need 2 tools to crank it down. So you got to be careful. This would be the time where you have these really nice scales and then you could slip and then put a big old scratch right in it. So generally the blade will be a little bit that way, and then you can tighten it back down. Or when you loosen it back down up a little bit, it'll kind of drop to center. I think these are going to also give me a little issue here, since they're free spinning together. This is a little different though, because you got to crank one down and then you got to crank the other one down. You can't just crank it and have it squeeze them together. Each side needs to be tightened. Once you get it tight about there, now I can go, it's got enough friction against it that I can go and tighten this side And come back and tighten this side. Got those good. This one here might spin that barrel a little bit since I need the pressure relief from the pocket clip. Let's drop that in here. It is a different size, so I gotta switch to T6s. What is happening to me? It's pretty common. Pocket knife. The pivot will be a T8, and most pocket clips will be T6s in most cases. And then the body screws, and this one is T8. Sometimes there are T6s, so that kind of varies. When you do a pocket clip, because the screws are so close, I like to go back and forth a couple times. When you get one tight, it kind of relieves a little pressure on the other one sometimes. Okay. Blade is out and solid. That's what you want to make sure it's tight enough, because I can go and maybe loosen this a little bit. But if it's not solid when it's open, that's when you want to tighten it down some more. Check the blade is actually still that way, so I could maybe even loosen it a little more. There it is, right in the center. But you still want to make sure, yeah, that's solid. Excellent. Okay, so we are there. Flips out, drops shut. A little bit tighter maybe. I might be able to loosen it just another little bit. I'll loosen this side this time just in case it. Still centered mostly. Boom. We have done it. Sencut Scepter completed. All right, there it is. So I moved the pocket clip to the other side, so you can do that before and after shot. But this is kind of the show side now. What's everyone think? This color is gross. I love it. Thumb flicks out really nice. Flipper tab works really good. Flick out. Flick out seems like it's just a little bit tighter right now. Although, what's happening to me? That was weird, huh? I don't know what I was just doing right there. Kind of one of those Matrix moments where I can't do what I want to do. Needs a little oil, but I think it looks good. What do we think about the finished product on this one? I tell you, that color is hideous. I have that other Sencut. They're very similar. What color should we do to this? You can watch the video unboxing it here. But yeah, some of these cheaper Sencuts are really cool. I got a bunch of Sencuts. They're fun. I've been doing a lot of dye projects with them. But yeah, this one was cool. What are we going to do with this one? Stay sharp. See you soon.